Have you ever experienced extravagance? In our language, it means the lack of restraint in spending money or using resources. The time I remember it most vividly are times when I was growing up in my parents' house and they were celebrating something and they threw big parties. My parents are excellent hosts, and in particular my mother enjoys putting on huge spreads of food and drink. In those times and on those occasions, I can tell you that the food and drink never ran out. People always had more than their fill of what they required. And it was a very happy set of children who managed to enjoy the leftovers in the days that followed those parties. The best word I can come up with to describe those times is extravagance. There was always far more than enough, because all of us were caught up in something more important than just the food or the drink or the resources. We were caught up in the greater importance of the celebration itself. The story this morning is set in the temple courts in Jerusalem, where Jesus has been teaching his disciples. He's sitting with them, observing people coming into the temple to make an offering to the temple treasury. Lots of rich people are giving big sums of money, but along comes a poor widow who puts in a couple of almost worthless copper coins. At this, Jesus proclaims that this widow has indeed put more in than all the others, for she gave out of all she had to live on. It's really tempting, having read this, to immediately jump to the conclusion that Jesus wants to make a point about giving. That in fact Jesus wants us to impoverish ourselves in order to give. Give to the church, give to a charity organisation, give to some other people. The story is about giving, but not in the way that you might think. But first, a little on widows. In this time and culture, women and men were not thought of as equals. Men were considered more important than women, and this was made apparent in the rights and privileges that men enjoyed. Most notably, men were typically the ones that were educated, owned and ran businesses and property, and earned money for the family. Women were not given this opportunity and were, in a very real sense, completely reliant on the men in their lives to provide for them. If a woman was widowed, the hope was that they could either remarry or that they would have a son or son-in-law who could bring them into his household. But this was obviously far from a perfect solution, and there were plenty of women who did not enjoy such protections. Women without this family support were often very poor and possibly had to turn to selling the only things they could, possessions or themselves. If you've read some of the surrounding verses, you'll also note that Jesus makes some pretty cutting remarks about the teachers of religious law, saying that they devoured widows' houses. There is some debate as to what this actually meant, but most people agree that they were in one way or another taking advantage of one of the most vulnerable groups of people in the community. In light of this context, it becomes even more amazing at what this poor woman gives into the temple collection. A collection that was made for the purpose of the upkeep of the temple. Whilst others were throwing in a part of their wealth, very publicly so that others could be impressed, she threw in the little that she had. And here is where we come to exploring extravagance. First, we can look at what this woman did from a really human, worldly point of view and perspective. Let me show you what that looks like. We could say that this was a poor woman, a widow, who throws in 2 copper coins into the collection. That the value of her offering, to be honest, is pretty worthless and certainly negligible in comparison to all the wealthy people throwing in all of the money that they have. And to top things off, in the first 2 verses of Mark chapter 13, just after this story, Jesus shares some prophecy about how the temple is going to be destroyed. And sure enough, in about 70 years' time, it is. The Romans come and they completely destroy the temple. And so you could even say the purpose of her offering was not worth anything. When we look at this from a human perspective, we can say words like pointless, worthless, wasteful. But now let me share with you how I think Jesus sees this woman and how he encourages us to see her too. A poor, vulnerable and precious child of God has come into her Father's house. She has a heart of worship and wishes to honour God with all that she has. She wants to do this so much that she is willing to be on public display as she gives her meagre offering, especially in comparison to the great wealth of people around her. In this spirit, she is so overwhelmingly generous in her giving to God's house and empties out everything she has to live on. This is how highly she values honouring God. This is her heart of worship on display for all to see. Seen through the spiritual lens, this true lens, we get words like amazing, beautiful, generous, worshipful, and extravagant. I believe that when Jesus comments on this poor widow's offering, he is sensing the delight of the Father at her worship. Just as an aside, I love the fact that in the gospel accounts of Jesus, it is more often than not the women who get it and the men that completely miss the point. It was a woman at the well who spent time talking with Jesus and introduced her village to him so that they came to believe. It was a woman who sat at his feet listening to his teaching. It was a woman who washed Jesus' feet with her tears and dried them with her hair. And it was a woman who poured a whole jar of incredibly expensive perfume over Jesus. These women of Jesus' day, who were looked down on and thought of as less valuable, got extravagance and worship so much more than the men around them. Jesus' motivation of bringing this woman to the attention of his disciples is not about earthly giving and generosity, but about kingdom extravagance. Have you ever tried to tell someone, you must love this person? It's impossible. It's one of the only things that someone else cannot force you to do. No one can force you to love someone else. Jesus could have said, go and do likewise, if he really wanted our wallets. But what Jesus really wants is our hearts first and foremost. He wants a love relationship with each one of us. A relationship that is built out of trust, a relationship that cannot be bought by any amount of money. Jesus uses this woman's offering to demonstrate to his disciples and to us what extravagant love for God looks like. It's not a command to go and do likewise. It's an invitation to come and know the God intimately that can inspire such worship and extravagance. Only a strong and true love can do this. Only a love that is extravagant in the first place can cause us as humans to reciprocate in the same way. Do you want to accept the invitation? I know I do. Hey everyone, thanks for watching the video this week. If you enjoy the content that we're uploading, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and then you'll be informed of any new content that we upload in the future. See you next time.